We have 3 representatives online, and in the room we have Representatives Featherston, Boatman, McDonald, who is here for Representative Ruiz, myself, Vice Chair McNorton, Representative Brantley, Representative Wilson, Representative Pishney, and also substituting Representative Bohai is here for Representative Wolf, and Representative Schmoy is here, and the 3 members online are, Stogstill, Steele, and Schreiber. So we've got, and Representative Getz is walking in. Okay. So, excellent. Appreciate everybody being here. I just wanted to update you on next week's agenda. The bills that we were waiting for referral did get referred, so we will be hearing 3 bills on Monday. They are 406, which is directing the governor to approve eligible programs for workforce Pell Grants and providing requirements for the state workforce development. And 340, which is prohibiting the Promise Scholarship Awards from being used to fund co-requisite courses. And 380, Senate Bill 381, which is requiring instruction to provide students with an understanding of communist and socialist regimes and ideologies, and that students pass an American civics examinations in order to graduate with a high school diploma. So those are the 3 that we are going to hear. I suspect they will have a lot of testimony. Michelle, have you already been getting... Good. And that was our purpose in letting people know early that we were what we expected to hear. So, and again, because it's unusual and we didn't make it official, we're going to try to offer as much grace as we can to get testimony in. It's always our objective to include, but also not keep Michelle and I here till midnight, or me that day. I think I was here to 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the morning when Michelle was absent. So we are going to get right into our testimony, and I'm going to start with the one that has the least amount of testimony, and that is Senate Bill 263. We do have 2 proponents who will be speaking by WebEx. So we will begin with Jason providing us information on what the bill says.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Just as an initial note, it doesn't happen often, but occasionally a bill will be amended multiple times on the floor, and those amendments will conflict with one another, and that results in a bill that can be difficult to then read as it comes out in a printed form. Senate Bill 263 is one of these such bills, and so Section 2 was amended multiple times by the Senate in their debate on the floor. I do have, our office has prepared a technical amendment should the committee decide to work the bill to clean up Section 2 if the committee makes no other amendments to Senate Bill 263. So just understand that that is coming. The brief is on the bill as it currently reads, to the extent the Section 2 provisions work together, and so I'll go over that part. The bill would establish new law governing guidelines and policies for conducting active shooter drills. Active shooter drills are defined in the bill on page 1, line 11. So you can see there it's an emergency preparedness drill designed to inform and instruct students, teachers, and other school personnel on responding in the event that an armed intruder is on the campus, in the building, or in the vicinity of the school. The bill would, this is the first part of the bill, it's Section 1 with these definitions. Section 2 generally requires the State Department of Education to establish best practice guidelines for conducting active shooter drills and to publish those by October 1st of this year, and then requires the Board of Education, the governing body of each school, to adopt policies that are consistent with those guidelines that are published by the department for conducting active shooter drills. I will note there is nothing in the bill that requires a school to conduct an active shooter drill, simply that it adopt policies for such drills that are consistent with the guidelines published by the department. We also know active shooter drills are specifically not to include active shooter simulations, which are defined as having elements that mimic a real-life shooting. And that is also part of Section 3, which prohibits schools from conducting active shooter simulations. And so you can see that part. The other part I will note on there that's still part of Section 2 on page 2 clarifies that no school shall conduct or require participation in an active shooter drill for students who are in grades kindergarten through 5. And so there will be no active shooter drills under the bill as written for grades K through 5. The school could still conduct such drills for its own teachers, staff, and other personnel, just not students in those grades. I also point out that under these provisions, a school means any public school and any accredited non-public school that provides any of the grades kindergarten through 12. Section 4 of the bill then requires each school to provide at least 1 hour of evidence-based violence prevention training each year to students in grades 6 through 12. The contents of that training is covered there on page 5 on identifying warning signs that a person may be a risk to themselves or others, importance of taking threats seriously and seeking help, and reporting dangerous, violent, threatening, harmful, or potentially harmful activity. There's also a requirement that the State Department develop and publish evidence-based training options that schools can use to fulfill this requirement. Section 5 requires each school to ensure that students have the opportunity to contribute to the school's safety and violence prevention planning, including providing students opportunities and to take leadership roles in prevention safety, providing encouragement and support of student clubs and programs focused on safety, and providing opportunities to learn about and seek help from adults regarding the prevention of bullying, sexual harassment, sexual assault, and suicide. And then Section 6 is an amendment to some rules and regs for the state fire marshal regarding crisis drills, and it adds basically a definition of crisis drill to include not only the intruder response, lockdown drills, but also active shooter drills as defined in Section 1, and to clearly prohibit again any active shooter simulations as those are defined in Section 1. The bill did pass the Senate on a vote of 38-1, would go into effect July 1st this year if enacted, and I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Any questions for Revisor Long? Seeing none. Oh, Vice Chair McNorton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I think I know the answer, but Jason, let's go to the last one on page 7 at the bottom. No crisis drill conducted by any public or private school shall include an active shooter simulation as defined in Section 1. Does that include law enforcement type simulations that may occur during the summer when no students or staff are there? The way this reads, go ahead. I'll let you interpret that for me.
So active shooter simulations are defined as mimicking real-life shooters that include tactical responses by law enforcement, and Section 3 generally prohibits that along with Section 6. There is a provision in Section 3 on page 5 that provides for conducting those kinds of training exercises, though they have to be done on the school property when they don't occur during regular school hours or at any time when students are present. No student would participate in the exercise, and the Board of Education or the governing body of the school has prior written authorization to use the school property. So yes, like a summertime exercise, tactical exercise would be permitted under Section 3.
Thank you.
I have Representative Brantley, then Steele, and McDonald. Representative Brantley?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for this. I was just wondering what other states, they have, how many other states have this type of policy implemented?
We'll have to look into that and get back to you.
That's a more of a research question, but I have a feeling it might also come up in some testimony. Representative Steele?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Jason. I just wanted to provide a quick clarification that this bill is not requiring schools to do the active shooter drill. It's just saying that they need a policy. And then my second question would be on section 4. That is saying that they must provide violence prevention training. So it's kind of two separate things.
So yes, Representative Steele, there is no requirement in the bill to conduct active shooter drills, only that they adopt policies that are consistent with the guidelines published by the State Department. But yes, Section 4 is a requirement to provide students in grades 6 through 12 with at least 1 hour or one standard class period of evidence-based violence prevention training each year.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Representative McDonald?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to go back to the simulations comment that you made. I'm a little confused. On page 7, at the bottom, it says, "No crisis drill conducted by any public or private school shall include an active shooter simulation." And then you said there was an exception, or no?
So there is an exception. So crisis drills typically are done during the regular school day involving students and staff personnel. And so during those time periods, you cannot conduct an active shooter simulation. Section 3 also restates that policy of not conducting active shooter simulations. But Section 3 does create an exception to do so under those conditions I mentioned, where there are no students present, no student participation, and there's prior written authorization from the governing body of the school to conduct that activity.
I guess a follow-up I have.
Yes, you may.
Thank you. I would be concerned about whether or not staff could opt out of these simulations. This is not a trauma-informed practice, and I would think staff could have been exposed to some trauma before. So is there anything in this bill that would allow staff members to opt out of participation?
That would be subject to local governing body policy.
Okay, that's a big concern of mine. Thank you.
Representative Boatman?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to clarify, is any of the trainings listed in this bill, are they required or are they all just suggested?
The active shooter drills are just required, the bill just requires guidelines and policies on active shooter drills. It doesn't actually require them to be conducted. The evidence-based violence prevention training is required, and the department is to provide a list of training options that schools may use to fulfill that requirement, and update that list. And then, but it says the schools may use any training, whether it's on the list or not, if the training otherwise meets the requirements of this section, which means it fulfills those requirements I listed in terms of what it's supposed to provide to the students.
Thank you. Follow up?
Yes, you may.
Am I correct that there is nothing in the bill that would explain how the required trainings would be paid for?
No, there's no funding mechanism for that training. The bill does note the list shall include any available no-cost programming that's out there that the department identifies in its list.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Revisor Long? Representative McNorton?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Jason, correct me, but I think that the school districts are required to do some drills, fire drill, tornado drills, and things like that, but this would not be included in one of those required drills they have to do. Is that, I think it's 3 per year. I'm just going off memory here, but
Yes, there are required drills, and to the extent there are required crisis drills, the bill simply defines what a crisis drill would include, and it would include an active shooter drill as a crisis drill,
as an option.
as an option, yes.
Okay.
Just to clarify Vice Chair McNorton's question, there are other drills that are required under current law. And that was a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were agreeing with
you were looking-
Representative McNorton, I'm sorry.
You were looking down, so I thought you were reading for the
What
answer.
was the question?
But it was, there are, under current law, whether in this statute or not, are there things that are required for emergencies?
Yes, there are required drills by school districts.
Thank you. Representative McDonald.
Thank you for your indulgence. I was trying to find where the exception was for the simulations, and I think you said section 3, and I am having trouble finding that.
Sure, if you look on page 4 of the bill, starting in line 41.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
And to answer the previous question, if you look on page 7 and you go up to line 10, administrators, requiring administrators of public and private schools and educational institutions to conduct at least 3 crisis drills each school year at some time during school hours. So there's at least 3 crisis drill requirements under current regulations of the state fire marshal. But again, none of those have to be an active shooter drill, but they can be. It'd be at the option of the school district.
Do they have to just be a fire drill?
No, crisis drills are being defined under this bill as a intruder response drill, a lockdown drill, or an active shooter drill. I guess it includes, and so I'm not clear if that is a exclusive list of what is considered a crisis drill or simply adding on to what is considered a crisis drill. The bill isn't clear.
If we work the bill, let's have an amendment that says it's an addition to. Representative Brantley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So like when we have a fire drill or such, we sign off and they are they're monitored monthly. Is there any way to double check whether schools, who are they accountable to? Just the district for this?
I believe it's regulations from the state fire marshal on conducting fire drills.
Right, but having these, would they be accountable to any?
The crisis drills would fall under the state fire marshal regulations.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Revisor Long? All right, Jason, thank you very much. I will point out that there is a fiscal note, and the headline on the fiscal note is the Department of Education, the Department of Health and Environment, and the State Fire Marshal indicate that enactment of SB 263 would have no fiscal effect on state expenditures. There may be costs to school districts to implement requirements of the bill, including required trainings. However, fiscal effect cannot be estimated. So with that, we will get straight into testimony. And knowing we have another bill, conferees, please keep in mind that we do have your testimony. I'd like you to do your testimony in 2.5 minutes, so we also leave enough time to hear the other testimony. And I am going to start with Brian Pete, the Executive Director of Prevent the Aftermath.
Good afternoon, Madam.
Brian, welcome to committee. You may begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, Madam Chair, and the honorable members of the committee. My name is Brian Pete. I serve as the director of the Riley County Police Department in Manhattan, Kansas. I am also the executive director of a new nonprofit agency called Prevent the Aftermath. We are an organization of subject matter experts in law enforcement, um, mental health, as well as prosecutorial attorneys. And our focus is on prevention of violence rather than tactical response and reaction to it. We were approached with this bill, and we think that this is because of this is an unfortunate reality to our societies. It's we see that this bill is it gives that flexibility for all districts to respond to it, but it also provides some standardization so that what we know now on behavioral indicators, trauma information, everything to that effect is blended into this bill so we can reduce the amount of anxieties or any unintended consequences that may result in something, unfortunately, again, that we have to do as a society to keep our children and to keep our educators safe. So with that and keeping all that in mind, I sincerely appreciate the opportunity to be here for myself as a director, as well as from our nonprofit Prevent the Aftermath. We are strongly in favor of this bill, and we believe that it provides flexibility and independence for the independent school districts to do everything they need to do, standardize with the least amount of trauma, but a heavy focus on the behavioral indicators for students to see something and say something. Thank you again for this opportunity.
Thank you. And would you like to stand for questions, Brian?
Yes, ma'am, I will.
Representative McDonald?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you so much for your testimony. I really appreciate your expertise. In these simulations that staff would be involved in, if they were, if a district chose to do them, typically are staff given a heads up? Is this something that would happen during a staff development meeting unexpectedly? And are there other areas, are the people given the opportunity to opt out? Adults?
Yes, ma'am. That's a very good question. From my understanding, this just provides some kind of direction as it relates so for simulations for the Riley County Police Department, for example, when we work with USD 383 and we do our simulations, we do them in the summertime with the volunteer cadre of staff as well as students that work into this, and that training is primarily for law enforcement, for fire department and EMS, but not necessarily for school response and how they do it. I think the schools have a very robust training as it is right now, but I hope that answers your question. I think I missed some of it.
Are you saying that students are involved in your simulations in
In
Raleigh
our
County?
Yes, ma'am. I apologize for interrupting you. In our simulations in Riley County, we do reach out for volunteers. So there may be students that may want to volunteer, and they serve as just bystanders or individuals who may be unfortunately injured. That helps the training aspect for law enforcement, fire, and EMS. But that's a strictly voluntary basis, and that's something that we work with the district on.
My reading of this bill would make that not possible. Is that? I guess that was a question maybe for the revisor. It said that there's students would not be able to be involved. I'm sorry, I didn't get permission.
I believe that was, I believe you're referring to a part of the bill that was a Senate amendment. Did you hear the question, Jason?
What's the question on student participation?
Would students be disallowed to participate if this bill were to pass in simulations?
No, yes. The bill prohibits active shooter simulations involving any students.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay. I have Representative Schmoy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Brian, when you guys are doing your simulation training, is that in the style of Alice training or run, hide, fight? What type of training are you guys doing? What is it with your brand in particular, the Prevent the Aftermath, or is it one of those others that is available?
Yes, ma'am. So for the Riley County, Prevent the Aftermath does not focus on tactics and training. That concentration is more on teaching folks what the behavioral indicators are so that if there are concerns, they're stopped before it comes to an actual shooting incident. For law enforcement in Riley County, our focus is on a tactical-based response. So in those simulations, it is a scenario in which we don't teach the students the Alice or alert or run, hide, and fight. This is more along the lines of there's a call, an incident that occurred at the school, at a playground, what have you may, and law enforcement does a response. So the training is for law enforcement and first responders. It's not geared for students to practice run, hide, and fight. If as the schools, the USD 3 does their drills, I'm not sure how they do or incorporate alert or Alice, but the training that I'm referring to for simulations, it's strictly for law enforcement and first responder purposes.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Representative Boatman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you speak at all to the price tag that is generally attached to these types of trainings?
Yes, sir, for simulation trainings.
Sorry, that's ma'am.
I'm sorry, ma'am. I apologize. Is that for the simulation trainings?
Yeah, any of the trainings that you provide.
Yes, and I apologize again. My camera is not working too well. It's yes, from our perspective, there are no costs that are associated with it, especially to the schools. There may be some costs for law enforcement from my department as we're looking at overtime costs to get officers to respond for simulation trainings. But those are, I think that's something that we work in conjunction with USD 3 who help us for our tactical based training. It's not something that a cost that's associated to them. For this bill specifically, it doesn't again, it doesn't mandate the to have this. It's just a definition and a guidepost is a standardization of what organizations and entities should be following.
Did that answer your question, Representative?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Any other questions for the conferee? Hearing none, we will move on to Katia Rodriguez, the Manager of State Policy from the Sandy Hook Promise Action Fund. Katia, welcome to committee.
Hello, Chairwoman Estes and honorable members of the House Committee on Education. My name is Katia Rodriguez, and I serve as Manager of State Policy at Sandy Hook Promise. And based in Newtown, Connecticut, Sandy Hook Promise was founded and continues to be led by families who lost loved ones in the tragic mass shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary School on December 14, 2012. And on behalf of the organization, thank you for the opportunity to testify today in strong support of SB 263, the Student Safe at Schools Act. And Sandy Hook Promise envisions a future where children are safe from shootings and violence in their schools, homes, and communities. And our work as a nonpartisan violence prevention organization informs the recommendations we offer today. And the Student Safe at Schools Act advances three important goals. First, it establishes clear, uniform definitions and standards for active shooter drills, distinguishing them from active shooter simulation. Second, it ensures drills are age appropriate and trauma informed with students' mental health and well-being in mind. And third, it establishes a requirement for evidence-based violence prevention training for students in grades 6 through 12. I did want to mention that there were a few Senate floor amendments that we would like to make known concerns that we have as follows. First, there was an amendment that prohibits active shooter drills for elementary students. While we understand that intent to reduce harm is important to reduce harm, it is really important to remember that 20 first graders were killed at Sandy Hook Elementary School, and research recommends trauma-informed age-appropriate drills, not eliminating them entirely. And if restoration of the original language is not possible, we respectfully suggest ensuring that adult school personnel in grades K through 5 are required to receive training by changing may into shall on page 2, line 19. And second, language banning active shooter simulations on school property may unintentionally prevent school personnel from training with law enforcement. And so we recommend clarifying that adult school personnel may participate in such training exercises. On page 5, line 2, before the word from, inserting the following and adult personnel. And on page 5, line 2, after the word conducting, inserting the phrase or participating. And there was new language on page 2, line 32 through 36, and on line 41. Was language that we worked with the Senate Minority Leader on to close a potential loophole in strengthening our intent to ensure that parents' ability to opt their students out of participating in drills is respected as an ultimate right. And so, given the floor amendment struck and replaced Section 2, this new language should be incorporated into the new language in Section 2 to ensure application as intended to the provision regarding rights to opt out. And finally, we asked the committee to restore provisions ensuring parental opt-out rights and a 24-hour notice requirement for drills. And I just want to end by saying that Sandy Hook Promise remains committed to advancing thoughtful bipartisan solutions and prioritizes student safety, well-being, and preparedness. So thank you for the opportunity to testify, and we respectfully ask the committee to work to recommend SB 263 favorably for passage. Thank you.
You're welcome. Katia, thank you for your testimony. Representative Schmoy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Katia. And I agree with you on the importance of making sure that our younger students also receive age-appropriate training. The fact that that was removed when we know that 20 of the lives lost were first graders was very disheartening to me. We need everyone to know what to look for and how to conduct themselves. In the Sandy Hook Promise, what is your guys' usual strategy? What do you guys usually recommend for students in those younger grades? What does that, not a detailed list, but overall, what does that look like in those kinds of situations for those kids?
Yeah, so we recommend tabletop activities. So they would be designed to invite discussion and interactive engagement, focused on understanding and preparing for a school-based active shooter event. And that is supported by research through the National Academy of Science. And it can be guided discussions and designed to occur in a safe, controlled environment. And so that's really important on our part.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Representative Featherston.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you talk about the harm that is done when these active shooter drills are not trauma-informed and age-appropriate?
Yeah, so especially with students in designing active shooter drills, schools really should consider student developmental and ability levels, as well as the overall mental and emotional well-being in school communities, especially with younger kids in pre-K through 5th grade. Students may express feeling upset through behaviors and due to lacking emotional vocabulary to express how they feel. And so it's really important that we work with these students in order to not only prepare them, but just to make sure that we're not harming them emotionally.
Did that answer your question? Okay, we have Representative Brantley and then McDonald.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for your testimony today. Do you know, so our districts do lockdown drills. How does this compare with what you've seen in other states? With like a comparison with a lockdown?
I don't have a special comparisons between other states. I do know that this legislation that we have introduced in Kansas has also been passed in Minnesota and Indiana for the Student Safe at Schools Act. And so I can provide that language of what that looks like in other states and how they're implementing it.
Thank you.
Representative McDonald.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Katia, for being here and sharing your expertise. You made some really good points, and I love that we're kind of explaining the difference between a simulation and a drill. I think that's really an important aspect for us to do. And I also appreciate your willingness to encourage us to have an opt-out for students and parents. As the child or the parent of an anxious child, I really do appreciate that part. But one thing I'm not seeing in this bill is the ability for staff to opt out. Do you have any anecdotal evidence of other districts doing that? And because adults go through trauma as well, and even the most trauma-informed efforts with, some of these simulated gunfire, mock injuries, fake blood, teachers being shot with pellet guns, that would be enough to send a lot of adults into crisis. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. I would have to do more research on that part since we, as an organization, focus on students' mental health and well-being in their schools, homes, and communities. So yeah, I would have to do more research, and if there is language that is wants to be incorporated in this legislation, I would be happy to look over it.
I really appreciate your advocacy for the kids, but I want us to not forget the teachers who've lost their lives in these situations as well. Thank you.
That's the last one I had. Representative Vice Chair McNorton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So to follow up on Nikki's question there, so Jason, Representative McDonald, I'm going to get fined.
It is March of Dimes. Special Olympics time for fines. I think we will do a joint report to the Amigos and fine you appropriately and help the Special Olympics kids.
Well, I'm glad the
I've duly noted on
assistant
the fine.
Amigo's not here.
The deputy is.
Yeah.
Deputy Amiga is online, and you are duly noted. You may proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to clarify what Representative McDonald is asking, on page 2, new section 2, at the last line there, 5, may conduct an active shooter drill for employees, personnel, and any other school staff. But then if you go down to line 33, acting as a parent to opt a student and participates to opt out. So it doesn't state that the staff can opt out. Could you clarify? Is that what? Maybe I'm missing it, but
Madam Chair, members of the committee, there is language on page 2 in lines 33 through 36 that references an ability of a parent or person acting as parent to opt a student out of participation in an active shooter drill. Without other context around that phrasing, it's unclear as to how that would be applied or implemented under the provisions of the bill, and it does not provide any language that clearly states a school employee could opt out of an active shooter drill.
Thank you. Representative McNorton, did that answer your question?
Yes, yeah.
All right. I'm seeing no other questions for our conferee. Katia, thank you for being with us today. We appreciate your input. We also have proponent written-only testimony from Mo Candy, the Executive Director of the National Association of School Resource Officers. And then we will now move to neutral testimony to Leah Fleiter, the Assistant Executive Director of Advocacy for the Kansas Association of School Boards.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Happy to be here. Apologies for my long title and appreciate you reading that all out. We are here as neutral because, of course, Kansas school board members are laser focused on student safety. It's just our concern around imposing standards from a national group that might interfere with local control, and we can certainly have conversations about that. I'm also happy, if it would be helpful to the committee, as a former school board member, I did observe at least, I think it was 2 of the simulations that take place in Manhattan that Director Pete referred to. So if there's any need to discuss how that is different, I would be happy to do that. And I know there are probably also clarifying information that can be provided by the KSDE school safety staff. So thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Why don't you, would you like to stand for questions? Representative Brantley, was it you that asked the question about the difference between the two? Did you want to ask that? Okay, I'll go to Representative Schmoy and then I'll come to you. Representative Schmoy.
Thank you so much for being here. This is obviously an incredibly important topic. What are schools doing right now? I know that there are some schools that do simulation training. I don't know if they're doing it with students. I do know that there's an option in some areas for staff. I was lucky enough to be able to go through a couple of those through the school district that I had previously worked for, so that I had a good feel for the emergency situation and had options embedded. So policy-wise, what are the school boards recommending for our Kansas, our local schools to be doing as far as the things outlined in this bill?
Well, we don't have anything specific to that bill because the bill is not law, right? So our legal staff issues policies once a law has been enacted. We do have quite a bit of policy around school safety and how we conduct things. So I can speak to that if that's helpful. And as you kind of alluded, there's probably some differences across the state depending on sometimes just the sheer size of a school district, how many buildings they might have and how to conduct those drills. If I may, Representative, Madam Chair, I think a lot of what we could be talking about here is covered under some of the existing drills that we have as far as, say, those lockdown or lockout drills, where we practice either, okay, this is a lockout, which is where, you know, something is occurring in the neighborhood of the school. And so the lockout is that all of the, you know, the exterior doors are locked, no one leaves or enters until the situation is resolved. For instance, in Manhattan, we once had like a person who was running away from the police, and they were dodging through the neighborhood near Manhattan High School, and so they had to go into lockout because the police were trying to catch the perpetrator, right? And I got a text from my son, hey, we're in lockout. And I said, oh, is this for real or is it a drill? And he's like, it's for reals, Mom. So that already happens, right? And then we also have the lockdown where the schools practice, okay, we're gonna practice that something has occurred in the hallways of our school. And so our training is that, okay, we lock the classroom door and we might go over, we make sure that we are sheltering in place away from like maybe the window in the door there and other things like that, so that if there is a bad person in the building, they cannot see in and see where the children are. So you can see that some of that now addresses some of these issues around if you have an armed intruder in the building, right? So have I gone too far, Madam Chair?
No, you haven't. I think you've sparked additional questions. So I think Representative Schmoy has another.
Okay.
So there's nothing across the public schools that is standard practice. Everybody's just kind of doing their own thing right now.
Oh, actually, I don't know about that, and that might be something that the school safety people could talk about as far as what KSDE recommends. So
Okay.
I'm sorry if I wasn't catching that.
Oh, no, that was kind of a follow-up from that. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Representative Brantley, did that answer your question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I'm not sure that this shouldn't be a Dr. Harwood question. I'm just blank right now on the name of the level of safety procedures that we just implemented, on whether it's a lock-in, shelter-in-place, and I don't know if Dr. Harwood can help me with that.
Dr. Harwood?
So some of this may, Madam Chair, members of the committee, some of this may have changed in the last 4 years since I've not been in a district. But when I left, you were required to do 9 crisis drills a year. It used to be that you had to do a fire drill every month and then 2 tornado drills. That changed so that you had to do, you still had to do 2 tornado drills, and I think you had to do at least 3 fire drills. And then the other drills could be some version of a crisis drill. The crisis drill could be an evacuation, which is very similar to a fire drill. Then you would have a little bit like what Ms. Fleiter talked about, which was a lockdown, where that is shelter in place. There's also lockout. They also typically have drills where if there's a medical emergency in the building where it's a hold, so you don't let students travel, just keep doing what you're doing, but we don't want people out in the hallway because something has happened. So all of those could be considered crisis drills under the former rules, and you had to do at least 9 of them during the school year. A couple had to be tornado, some of them had to be fire, but other than that, the districts could decide how they did the rest of them.
Yes, you may.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Okay, so I had to phone a friend there. The standard response protocol that's implemented from the I Love You Guys Foundation, which is free, is that anything part of what we're talking about here? Because I was part of that this fall, and it is very gentle on students and very clear and concise.
So, and Jason will have to correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that this State Department of Education will identify protocols that are evidence-based that would notify districts of what those are, and districts would have, so as long as I Love You Guys meets the criteria that are set forth, then it could be identified. There are a number of them. A lot of the biggest difference is wording that they use, and so that's in there. It's really important that districts work with local law enforcement about what their nomenclature is so everybody knows what they're talking about. So if I understand it, for that, there has to be a protocol that is identified as evidence-based by the state board. Then districts would create policy around that. And then if they do a active shooter drill, they would have to follow that.
One more, and we need to move on.
So there's already a list of those protocols that schools can choose from?
I don't know that we have published a list as is required by the bill. There are a number of those protocols out there. What this would require KSD to do is to look at some of those protocols, make sure that they fit the requirements of evidence-based, and then provide them.
And some of them are free, correct?
I don't know that the free ones meet the requirements, so that would be the other reason my hesitation. There are free ones out there that could be identified as long as they meet the requirements.
Thank you, and I will let Ms. Fleiter come back up. Thank you, Dr. Harwood. Representative Featherston.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just would like a clarification of terms. I'm in communication with my K-6 teacher daughter and one of my constituents who is a gun safety expert whose kid has been pretty traumatized by active shooter drills. So we have lockout, where we are securing the building, nobody gets in. We have lock in, where I think that is where my daughter takes her kids to the safe room in her
That could be, right.
classroom. And then active shooter, what my constituent is describing is when, like, there's a person in the building pretending, like shaking the door, that the kids, that's, I think, what we're talking about, what we're trying to avoid is those drills. Could I just get a clarification? Because that's what my constituent is telling me is traumatizing for their children, is when you have a pretend shooter in the building. Whereas my teacher daughter is saying, well, we do need to have these drills so that the kids,
can practice,
but she does not mention anybody like shaking the door, which my constituent's kid has definitely experienced.
Okay, so I don't know specifically. Yes, and I do have a friend behind me that I might have to phone. I would say that part of the training of even if, sometimes I think it's couched, which would be especially relevant for younger grades, is that that we're practicing some safety now and we're doing this thing, right? And, that could involve someone trying the door to make sure that the door is locked as per the protocol. I can't verify, and Dr. Harwood maybe, whether someone is, rattling the door, but that could be part of any kind of safety training when we're talking about for kids that, we're training to be safe. And part of that training is that the teacher locks the door and we all go to the safe room that's in the room, or we do whatever.
So Representative Featherston's comments are similar to a line I thought I was going to go down. And what you mentioned with those drills, did somebody kind of, is it your sense that your districts say, consider what's age appropriate?
I would imagine they would. I mean, again, there's 284 school districts, but, these are teachers and administrators who are in the buildings with the kids every day. Obviously, they don't want to do anything that's going to be unduly burdensome or harmful to kids. At the same time, we've got that, that discussion that we've already talked about, in the case of Sandy Hook, a lot of those victims were first graders, right? And I know, and you and I are both crying now, right? And so we don't want to have to worry kids, but we also need to train kids on safety. And I know, like, for instance, if I may, Madam Chair, I know that a lot of this is, sometimes it can be sort of very subtle training. I know in some of the schools in Manhattan, the fire department, they might just have a day or an afternoon where they drive the truck up and the kids just get to come out and the firefighters kind of interact with them. And I've been in a situation in the firehouse where they talk about how they will make sure that the kids become familiar with what a firefighter might look like when he or she has all that gear on. Because if you're a kindergartner, that person might be kind of scary, right? And so they show, look, if I'm coming to fight a fire at your school or to make sure that there isn't one, the first thing I do is I put on this outfit that protects me. And then I put on these really big boots. You may have seen some of this too, Representative Schmoy. And then, then I put on these gloves because they protect my hands. And then, I put on this helmet. So some of it is just as kind of low key, if that's the right word, as that, to try to make sure that kids know that should they be in a situation where, the hallway is filled with smoke and this person comes in walking in, that they should not be afraid of that person. Is that helpful?
Thank you. I have a question from Representative McNorton, and then I have a comment, and then we're going to move on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, thank you, Leah. I guess from what you've said, the school districts and the schools already have training they're doing.
Right.
You've gone through
According to law.
yeah, according to law. You've gone through a lot of circumstances, just the
Right.
one with the fire department was a great example. So I'm a little bit surprised that you are neutral because you're talking about why we need to make sure that we are doing this right.
Right, yeah. I understand
I'm
your
a little
confusion.
confused why
Right.
you're not a proponent instead of a neutral.
Yes,
and that's,
I understand that.
the more
So
you
thank
talked,
you.
I had to ask.
I know. Thank you for doing that. So it's because we already have these things in place, and we now have, a very well-meaning national organization that is saying we would like to come in and tell you to do it this way. When I don't know that there's been anything identified today in this discussion of any glaring omissions on the part of a Kansas school district.
Okay, that's fair. I just, the more
Thank
you
you.
talk,
No,
wanna-
because I know you're a school board member too, so I appreciate that.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, so here's my comment, and it leads to a question. I'll let you answer it, and then if he would like it, Dr. Harwood is welcome to weigh in on it. As I listened to the discussion about what the different terms mean, when we have different law enforcement and we have different districts, and we all may be using some of these same words in different ways, does it become important for us to define these terms so that in a true crisis, we all have a shared meaning of some of these terms? And that's not in the bill, but it's just occurring to me as a result of this committee
Right.
that is a concern.
Thank you. So I do know that as part of some of these law enforcement simulations that many districts have now, including my own district, Manhattan, that's one of the reasons why they bring in all the jurisdictions, because they want to make sure that everybody knows that when we say there's an active shooter situation at X school, that we all know what that means. And honestly, is to make sure that all their radio frequencies are able to talk to each other and those kinds of things, okay? And so there is a lot of coordination that already takes place. I know in Manhattan, we actually have a person who's also the school district communications director, who is our school safety director. And when I was on the board, she made us go through training. She made the board go through some certification about, understanding how we respond and react to emergencies. So there's a lot that's already being done and a lot of work to make sure that we are all using the right terminology, and I would imagine that Dr. Harwood could probably add something from his colleagues.
It seemed like you had said using the right local terminology, and I just think about when somebody from a different jurisdiction helps another jurisdiction, like a common definitions are more important than I thought of it. But Dr. Harwood, did you want to weigh in on this one? Does that exist and I'm just not aware of it, or do you see that as a need?
So the jurisdictions, when they do a simulation, which again, very different than a drill, that's what they are practicing and doing. So they are working on that. The nomenclature needs to be, everybody in the building and district needs to understand that. We worked with our local law enforcement to make sure they understood the words we were going to be using, mostly because of a misunderstanding on something they were using with dispatch, talking about something as being a lockout versus, or a lockdown versus a lockout. And because our parents knew what those words meant, they were overly concerned because it was something different. So I do think it's important that everybody knows what they're talking about, and it's important that there's relationships between the school district and first responders. I think that's happened already. This has been going on since 1999. 2012 with Sandy Hook was another time because it was elementary students. It has evolved over time. There was a time when it was, yes, people were shaking doors and all those kinds of things. Sometimes if you're doing a lockdown, somebody may be looking to make sure, did you lock your door? That doesn't need to be shaking like you're trying to get in. That falls into a simulation versus just a drill. I think some of those things being clarified, making sure that's there is important. I'm not going to disagree with Ms. Flighter saying districts are already doing these things in one way or another. So if we just have to put together a list of things, here are some to choose from, they need to look at the policy they already have and say, yep, we're good, or maybe we ought to look at this. I think that's kind of where we're going with this.
I guess my question is on a statewide basis. From the testimony, I'm unclear of whether or not the definitions are the same statewide.
I think that's going to have to, for the first responders, that's a conversation with the Highway Patrol or somebody else. Highway Patrol is the one organization that can respond anywhere in the state, so they may have a concern with that. I don't know that we have a concern with, I've never had a concern with that from the district perspective because we're working with our local folks.
Thank you. I said we were going to move on, but Representative McNorton and Vice Chair, okay, very, very quickly, please, because we do have another bill to hear.
McDonald, that's a fine, Madam Chair.
I was about to call on McNorton after you, but I think I said McDonald. I apologize if I didn't.
Dr. Harwood, I was just wondering if the timing of this, if it took effect in at the publication of the statute book, if you have any concerns about having time to look through the curriculum and approve things that,
So
the safety curriculum?
Some of that could get done. How extensive it is would be hampered by the timeline.
Okay.
It's not that, I mean, you can start off by Googling some things and then you kind of go from there. Their districts are already using curriculum, so we can start there. Same thing with the different crisis things. Having that done by October 1st does not seem overly difficult, but I will say it will probably not be complete at that time. It will be available, but districts may say, hey, well, we're using this one. We may have to look at that one and put it on there.
And I keep trying to move us to the next bill. So Representative Featherston, you are absolutely our last person.
I appreciate that honor, Madam Chair. I think what I just want to throw out is that, especially when I'm referring to my daughter and what they're doing in their class, because of the times in which we live, I think many people, the first assumption when they hear lockdown or lockout, they think it's a shooter drill. And an active shooter drill is perhaps a different thing than a lockdown or lockout. The one time I had a student caught in the hallway during a code red, it wasn't a gun incident, it was a mental health incident outside the building where the children needed to shelter in their classroom just for safety. So I guess that would be my one thing I'd like to just make sure we're clear on what we're requiring, not requiring, outlawing in the bill.
Just a quick response to that. So that is a lot of language that has evolved since 1999. Originally, it was you need to have some special code word. Now the advice is you should say what you need people to do. Now, after that, how explicit you can be in a short thing that, I mean, how good it is, that's one thing. But the alert needs to tell people what to do. And so typically you would go from a lock out or lock down to an intruder or something like that. So that has evolved over time.
Thank you all for the robust discussion. I think we get into these and we find out something's that we thought would be simple is not always necessarily simple. And thank you to all of our conferees for being with us today. I'm going to close the hearing on SB 263 and now open the hearing on SB 339. And as Jason works his way up to explain the bill, one of the most controversial parts of this bill, it includes applying this bill to middle school, and I will just let everybody know that I have an amendment coming that removes the middle school from the bill. You may feel differently or you may feel the same, but I try to be careful about not duplicating too many amendments with Jason. I also think there may be amendments based on your conversation here at the table for the bill that we just heard. I will be working these bills on Monday, so if you think somebody else is interested in your amendment, you may want to coordinate and reduce the workload on Jason. Jason, thank you. You may begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Remember when I said that bills rarely get conflicting amendments when they're amended on the floor, and occasionally we have to clean those up? Unfortunately, you have another one in Senate Bill 339, and again, our office has prepared a small technical amendment to clean up a conflicting floor amendment that appears in subsection B of new section 1. But section 1 of the bill is the mandatory recess provision. And so beginning in school year 27-28, each school day would have to provide a minimum of 30 minutes of daily organized recess for grades kindergarten through 8, as the bill currently reads. And recess is defined as supervised and unstructured play, physical activity, or social interaction. Does not include any physical education classes. And also the bill provides that recess cannot be withheld as a disciplinary measure unless the student is an immediate threat to themselves or others. The other part of Senate Bill 339 is in section 2 on page 2 of the bill. And this requires that beginning this upcoming school year, 26-27, the State Board of Education is to establish a state fitness test that aligns with the presidential physical fitness test to assess overall fitness of students in grades 1 through 12. There's also a requirement that awards be handed out for students who meet or exceed the 50th percentile, and then again for students who really excel and meet that 85th percentile or above. There is an exclusion for students with disabilities or medical exemptions from the physical fitness test. This bill, the final amendment, I'll just point out, the remainder of the bill is simply a conforming amendment with respect to the school term. so that the organized recess period is part of the school term. The bill passed the Senate on a vote of 24 to 15 and would go into effect just July 1st, with the caveat that the mandatory recess provisions begin in school year 27-28. With that, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Representative Schmoy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I feel like I'm monopolizing things today. Jason, thank you. When it says mandatory recess, we live in Kansas, and the school year does go over the winter and other inclement weather. Does it specify in there anything about indoor or outdoor recess, or is it just recess?
No, the definition doesn't specify the location. It's simply engaging in supervised, unstructured play, physical activity, or social interaction.
Perfect. Thank you.
Representative McDonald.
If a student is in in-school suspension, is that covered here? Would they have to be let out to have recess?
I think that could be one interpretation of that prohibition on withholding recess as a disciplinary measure. I'm not sure if that was what was intended with that provision, but I think that is one way to read that provision.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Bohai.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation. Do you, and this could be a research question, probably is a research question, but do you know when we stopped doing the state assessments for physical fitness? Because I know when I was in school, we had to do them.
So the presidential fitness test, which I will embarrassingly admit I never once passed, I'm the slowest runner I know, is not like a state assessment, but I don't know if Kansas ever had a fitness test. We did. Okay, I didn't grow up here, so Dr. Harwood, do you know the answer to that question? Okay, thank you.
That was going to be my recollection. I know it was never a statutory requirement. I don't know if that was ever even a state board policy requirement to do I think it was a district by district.
USD 281 definitely had it when I was there.
Thank you. I have Representative Featherston.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Do we have a current guideline on grade school recess?
Like a statewide guideline, I would defer to the department. We do.
Any other questions for Jason? Seeing none, we will go. Thank you very much, Jason. The fiscal note, the department has no fiscal effect, but the school boards indicate they would require school districts to pay for staff to supervise the increased recess time. However, an effect cannot be estimated. And then I think if we remove those from sixth grade and higher from this bill, that number that we couldn't estimate would estimate lower. Representative Boatman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On that exact note, I would note that it doesn't appear that the fiscal note includes anything about the required physical fitness test, which I imagine would cost something to administer, especially if we're going to hand out awards. Thank you.
There may be an award. I should let Dr. Harwood answer this, but my recollection is that you do it during PE, so it's not additional time, and there's no charge for the test. Now, whether award, what I remember getting was a certificate that came from the federal government. I don't know that we would have to create awards, but if we do, yes, there would definitely be a cost for that. And Dr. Harwood can opine the next time we call him up. We'll help reduce, we'll give you a list rather than treat you like a yo-yo and up and down. And we should give you a seat in the front row that's yours, so you can go back and forth all the time. All right, so we will move to proponent testimony. Andrew Weens from Dugan Consulting. Good afternoon, Andrew. Welcome to committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good to be here, everyone. My name is Andrew Weens, and I am with Dugan Consulting Group today representing FGA Action, and we support Senate Bill 339. As the chair mentioned, this bill has, and the revisor did a nice job explaining, this bill has been changed quite a bit since the introduction. And so I just want to start by saying that we'd be fine with the chair's amendment to move it back to elementary, K through 5. I think the core requirement is simple, 30 minutes of daily organized recess for students. In current language, it's grades K through 8, but sounds like that will be changing. And there's a delay on the implementation date, which the revisor talked about, 27-28. Schools can't take recess away as punishment, which that kind of question was already asked previously as well, unless there's an immediate safety situation. And then recess counts as instructional time, which is important. Schools won't lose school day minutes by complying. The state fitness test was mentioned earlier, that was, I think, added in the Senate committee. And the bill doesn't require any new facilities or funding, just scheduled time, which obviously with the supervision is going to require some staff, but hopefully the schools already have staff available to do that. And again, yeah, the implementation date was delayed. I think I hope all of us agree that recess is a good thing for kids. Obviously, how you implement that and whether you require it is sort of the question that this bill causes us to ask. Recess isn't just free time. It's not just kids running around and doing whatever they want, but that is part of the benefit of recess, is kids being able to have agency and unstructured play. That helps them practice for life after school and life after recess. So, but it also includes improved outcomes. Recess comes with improved outcomes. Teachers, I think, overwhelmingly report that students do better when they return from recess. They're more focused, less disruptive, and better prepared to learn. There's been studies done on that. So I would encourage the committee to support this legislation. And again, I will reiterate that we're okay with the amendment to put it back to elementary school. And I would be happy to stand for questions.
We will start with our online question from Representative Steele, then we will go to Representative McDonald's and Chairman Getz, and Brantley and Featherston.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you so much, Mr. Weens, for being here. I just kind of wanted to clarify on page 1 of the bill, on line 13, it says provide a minimum of 30 minutes of daily organized recess. I'm just curious if the intent of the bill was to make sure that that was 30 minutes all at once and not divided up into maybe 2 15-minute recesses or a 20-minute and a 10-minute, if it was like a consecutive 30 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative Steele, for the question. I don't think we have an opinion, and I don't believe that the bill specifies either way, and certainly would defer to the revisor if needed. But I know some school districts have shorter blocks of recess and have shown good results from that as well.
Did Representative Steele, did you have any other questions?
Madam Chair, I just wanted to make sure whether the intent was to ensure that there was a consecutive 30 minutes or if dividing it up was fine, because I do believe a lot of schools do divide that time. I just wanted to make sure our intent of the bill, because I agree with you, recess is vitally important. And I absolutely love the part where it cannot, recess cannot be withheld for disciplinary reasons. So thank you for bringing this. Highly supported. I just wanted to make sure that we were doing the intent. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome, Representative McDonald.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not sure why we're asking a conferee about their intent. Did you bring this bill, or I know your organization's from Florida, so I'm kind of trying to understand why a Florida organization has do you have curriculum or something that you're selling? I'm trying to. No?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative, for the question. We supported it in the Senate side. I think there were other conferees as well that supported it. I will note also that the presidential fitness test, I believe, was included in the governor's application for the Rural Health Transformation Fund as something we will implement as a state. So we're hopeful that it gets broad-based support with the changes that have been discussed by the chair.
I guess the only other comment I have, you said something about how recess counts as instructional time, but I really believe that's up to our Department of Ed and our state school board, so I would take issue with that. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to interject here in the same line of thought, just for clarity. So the Rural Transformation Grant that the governor included this in that grant. What is the value of that grant?
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I remember right, I think it's over $200 million a year to the state, 220-ish, 200. Someone could correct me on that.
For 5 years?
Yeah, for 5 years.
For 5 years, okay. So not having that could put a significant amount of dollars for rural health at risk,
Yeah, I think-
rural transformation.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I think potentially, I think some of the things that we applied or said we were doing in the application were things that we were already doing, and some of the things that were included in the application were things that we said we intended to do. And I think this is one of those that we said we intended to do as a state.
And how does that grant money get used?
Thank you, Madam Chair, in a pretty wide variety of ways. I think there were several focuses that were determined by the application, so some of it could go to like rural hospitals for workforce initiatives and a lot of different things that were detailed in that grant. So I don't know that I have a specific answer, but in a lot of different ways, it's a lot of money, obviously.
Okay, well, when we get to, if you want to add an answer to that question, it's welcome. I will go to Chairman Getz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to ask for those studies that you referenced around the recess, if you want to send those to me, or if the chairwoman would like to have that for the committee, but I'd like to see those. And then, do you know if the rural health transformation, did it need to be K through 12 for the physical fitness test? Or was there a certain age demographic or a certain amount of times? Like some of the feedback I'm getting from superintendent is every year that being tested on a kid for all years? Or is there some benchmark years, almost like we do our assessments, that would fit those dollars in that grant and not violate the terms of that?
Yep. So thanks, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative, for the question. So one of the studies that I reference is footnoted in the testimony, and I apologize if you don't have that yet, but you should have the testimony hopefully in your S-Drive or online at some point. It's a CDC study on recess, so it has some information in there, some good statistics on the benefits of recess. And then remind me your second question really quick. Sorry.
Just
you always answer the second question first.
There was any other benchmarks that
for the fitness test?
Yeah, for the fitness test that we can stick with.
Yeah, I probably didn't remember the question because I don't know the answer. But we can sure look that up and see if it stated, every other year or every year or up through grade 8 or how that worked. We'll try to find that out. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Representative Brantley.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for being here. I was just thinking that sometimes, like some of the upper elementary grades, we do brain breaks. Well, we do them in all grades. Do brain breaks count if they're active during that time?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative, for the question. That is a good one. So I think because of the way the bill is drafted, and I know there's going to be a technical amendment as well, I think it would depend on how the recess definition is drafted. So there at the bottom of page 1, regularly scheduled time during the school day when students may engage in supervised, unstructured play, physical activity, or social interaction with other students. Doesn't include time in PE class, and obviously, again, would defer to the revisor on that question.
So it's on line 13, it talks about an organized recess, but then it says unstructured play. Would both of those be in the definition, that it's an organized time, but it's unstructured? I feel like those kind of offset each other a little bit.
If I could phone a friend, that would be wonderful, Madam Chair.
Jason, would you like to add clarity, please?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, I believe the use of the word organized in line 13 is in reference to a scheduled time for recess, so that is daily scheduled time for recess. But the recess itself is simply supervised unstructured play, and so it is not directed by any school personnel in terms of what the students are to be doing, just supervised by school personnel.
Thank you, Jason. Representative, does that answer your question? Thank you. Representative Featherston.
I'll pass. I just wanted to clarify where you were from, and Florida was agreed.
I'm from Bel Air, Kansas, but represent an organization that is based in Florida. Representative, thank you.
Representative Bohai, if you want to answer the question you wanted to ask and then answer your question.
Well, the question I wanted to ask was answered, but I will just go back to the rural health and some of the things that we're using those funds for potentially in the application is also helping those that live in the rural areas get to kidney dialysis treatment and chemo treatments. That was part of the funding requested. So it's a pretty big, important thing that we want to make sure we can continue to do.
Thank you. Any other questions for the conferee? Seeing none, we will.
Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Reens, for being with us today. We will move to opponent testimony. Our first opponent is Ms. Fleiter, and since I've already articulated her title, I will spare the committee that again.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, glad to be here. Our opposition to this bill centers on our member-adopted legislative platform, which, of course, if you've heard me more than once in this committee, we talk a lot about dependence on local control. And so that's our concern here, that local boards are best equipped to determine how recess and physical activity should be incorporated into the day. This, we also have some concerns around how this would fit into some of the requirements that we already have in our schools directed, by the state board or other laws. If we are required to do the 30 minutes of recess, and nobody is arguing against recess, right? If you've ever been, in a classroom or been a parent, you know that kids running around is good. Okay, so let's set that aside. We're not opposed to recess. Our concern is that, again, this is kind of imposing a standard on us that we may not be able to comply with in a way that gets at what we're trying to do, which is increase student achievement and have healthier kids. So if we have, let's just say at the K through 5 level, we have MTSS systems that we go through, and then you insert this 30 minutes of recess into it, how does that affect what we're doing? Okay. Now, I appreciate Madam Chair's potential amendment about removing it from middle school on up, but I would just like to say that, a good example of how that might have conflicted with the middle school schedule is if you are a middle school or an elementary school and you have, a special or you have some sort of class that you have developed, even at the elementary school level, that gives kids the benefit of having an extra enrichment activity, and it has the dual benefit of giving the teacher either new plan time or additional plan time. That's part of the negotiated agreement, right? And so now dropping this recess requirement into the school day, while we all agree recess is fantastic, it's now interfering with the negotiated agreement that may be existing at that K-5 level or not now at the upper levels thanks to the pending amendment. So perhaps I'll just stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Ms. Fleiter. Questions for Ms. Fleiter? Representative Brantley?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I guess I missed the connection with MTSS and just a scheduled time for.
Yeah, just thank you.
So right now we have recess going on.
Right.
Would this be any different than what we regularly have with supervision? Because we have like TAs that may be in the class or the teacher.
Right.
I guess I'm not understanding why it would increase.
Well, our understanding of the way the bill is written is that it potentially adds additional responsibilities for supervising this recess time, especially if you've got a minimum of 30, but there's the inference there about, we also have that discussion of 60 minutes of physical activity at the upper levels, and do we have the staff to honestly supervise squirrely middle schoolers and high schoolers if they're out running around on a non-existent playground? So there's just pieces of this that just don't seem to work, as well-intentioned as they may be.
Thank you. Representative Getz?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Leah, for testimony. Would you be able to talk in any broader scale of what blocks do exist for instructional time that are the MTSS that might.
I think if I may, Representative Getz, I'd like to kind
And
of phone a friend. That's
I
really
had
a
it
better
before we started
question.
talking about this, and I had Frank's name written beside it. So, you know, just, and that may be more in a general format. You may not be able to come up and really explain it, but maybe just send us, you know, some information on, and does that vary a lot from district to district with the local control options, or is that set by the state board of how many minutes of different subjects have to be accomplished? And just general question.
I would defer to the department.
Dr. Harwood did submit testimony, so we'll let him address all of those at that appropriate time. Are there, Representative Bohai?
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, for letting me be very active in your committee today. I understand that this is I think I understand that this was a floor amendment because it's bolded and italicized regarding the presidential fitness test. Okay.
Jason, would you like to answer that? Not everybody can see us shaking our heads yes and no in committee today. Yep, that's okay.
Yes, Madam Chair. Language that is in bold and italicized was a committee amendment there in Section 2.
Okay. So I guess now my concern is not only that the kids get outside for recess or inside if the weather's bad. I'm not saying that there can't be unstructured play inside, but the potential impact that would have on our rural health initiative grants, right? And so could you speak to potentially if you are also an opponent of that section, Section 2, or just the local control aspect of how the day is scheduled?
Yes to number 2. Our concern is more that school districts, local school boards have that constitutional authority to run their districts. And they are providing recess time, they are providing PE, and whether, you know, if a local district wants to do the presidential fitness test, that is certainly up to them. And we don't have any, you know, heartburn about, and we have no involvement with the rural health thing. So
No, I know you may not have involvement with that, but when the governor puts it in their application for it.
yeah, I don't have any connection to that.
No, well, I guess, so then you're against what the governor said with her application for it?
No, honestly, I didn't even know that was part of the application until just now.
Okay.
So I was today years old, as kids say. So our thing is more about how the school day is structured.
Okay.
Personally, as someone who never passed the physical fitness test, I was a slow runner, and I can't tell you how many years I banged because I couldn't do the chin-ups. So my personal feelings aside, this is really more focused on how the school day is structured. Okay. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Representative Steele, you had your hand up and then it disappeared. And before we move on, I want to make sure that you speak up. If you wanted to answer a question, silence lets me know I should move on.
I was kind of going with the same way that the previous representative did, so I'm good. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're very welcome. Ms. Fleiter, thank you for being with us here today. And we will go to Dr. Jim Carlskent, United School Administrators. Thank you for coming back to committee today. We haven't seen you as much this year.
Well, you haven't seen, good afternoon, Madam Chair, and I don't want to take a great deal of time, but a little explanation. Because the Senate has been, that's why you guys are catching all these bills, because the cell phone bills passed, and now the Senate's working bills, and they're sending this way. So I've been in the Senate too much.
I thought you were going to say we've been well-behaved.
I've missed you guys, okay? Madam Chair and committee, thanks for being here. USA supports promoting student well-being through physical activity. However, we appear in opposition of 339. School districts are best positioned to determine instructional time and daily schedule that fits their unique characteristics. There's little flexibility in this bill, and it removes all decision-making from the local from the local school district. Also, one size fits all does not reflect what's best for all the schools in Kansas. Kansas schools vary in size, vary in location, resources, and instructional models. So some schools are even on a 4-day week. What's that going to be? Do you have 30 minutes, or you increase it, by that? When I wrote this testimony, middle schools were in it. I put it on block schedules. Some have block schedules if it goes out. But I would also remind you that in committee, in the Senate committee, there were amendments added to this thing. If this thing gets changed, you all know, you get to go to conference committee and get to argue over, you know, what happened. So middle schools are not out of this totally, you know, from that standpoint. If there is recess time lacking, parents, teachers, administrators should work together on local situations that fits their school and their school needs best. A state mandate is not really the answer. So, you know, I go back to a lot of the local control. I'm also concerned about an unfunded mandate for some schools. By taking out middle schools, if it stays out, I think we won't see as much of an unfunded mandate. There is potential, but there is that concern. So for these reasons, I ask you to oppose the bill, and I'll stand for questions if you have questions.
Thank you. I think my reasons for taking out middle school are the same as yours. Glad you still mentioned them because I have to get everybody else to support my amendment if I'm going to get it passed, or at least 50%. So thank you for your input today. Any questions for the conferee?
Everybody's looking at the clock. I'll sit down.
Representative, are you sure? Okay. Okay, well, Frank is next. Dr. Harwood is next. You are neutral written only by what I have here, but I think we might have made a mistake and you intended to be neutral in person? Thank you.
Sounds like I was going to get called up anyway. Madam Chair, members of the committee, so we did present neutral testimony basically to clarify a few things. So the state board recommendation is 30 minutes of recess a day, so there's not a change there. The difference would be is that this would set the minimum required at the maximum allowed in instructional time. So right now, districts can have 2 15-minute recesses, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. We actually do think it's better educationally to break those up. And so to count towards instructional time, you can have 15 minutes in the morning, 15 minutes in the afternoon. So the maximum in instructional time and the minimum required are the same. There are districts that have more than 30 minutes of recess time, so they have 20 minutes twice a day. They can do that. They just have to have a little bit longer school day, which is completely fine. They can have really as much as they want. I will say that with just to kind of go with the middle school part a little bit, the original bill said K-5, and then it changed. In some places, 5th grade is in middle school. If the middle school currently doesn't have recess, this would actually be a reduction in instructional time, even though it would be counted in that way, but they would not be in class as often. So if you are looking at middle school as, and if you define it as elementary versus K-5, that would help some districts out. I will say that we had more concerns with the bill on the Senate side because it talked about you could have another 60 minutes that would also count as instructional time, which would have been a significant decrease in instructional time for reading and math, which we've talked a lot more about than recess. So again, State Board has already said you should have 30 minutes of recess. You can have 2 15-minute recesses, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. So in that regard, there wouldn't be any change. I'll move on to the fitness test. The fitness test was added in committee, so there is an updated fiscal note because there would be a cost for developing that. The presidential fitness test has a long history. It was never required. Districts did it on their own. It really stopped being used about the 90s. There is currently not an official presidential fitness test. So in the bill, it talks about that has to be done by 26, 27. I don't know that we'll have a presidential fitness test to go off of at that time. So we would ask that that get amended to say that once those guidelines are available. Now, because we've had to deal with this, if you Google presidential fitness test, you will get a lot of places that come up with the old fitness test and say you can continue to use this. But at this point, the Department of Health and Human Services and Health and Disease or whoever is going to be administering it there's a link, but it doesn't do anything. So again, this seems like if a fiscal note to get $1 billion doesn't seem to be like that should be too much of a problem, but there will be costs for the for the State Department, and there could be costs for the state. I think the question that came up that could be addressed is, especially at the high school level, not everybody has PE class. So I don't know when you administer this. So finding out if you just have to have the presidential fitness test during PE classes would make it a lot easier. This bill says you do it for every student every year, regardless of if they have a time in their schedule that you would do that. So that would cause additional administrative burden and/or costs for school districts. So if that can be clarified, that would be great. But those were the things that I wanted to cover. And now I'll go to whatever questions I didn't answer as I went through that.
I'm going to start with Vice Chair McNorton and then Representative Boatman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So do all schools, 284 districts, grade schools, have recess now that you know of?
So yes, they all have some form of recess. We tried to look, there wasn't a great way to look into it, so we did some spot checking. There were some that only had 20 minutes. We think that was the least amount of time that they had. There were others that had 45 minutes.
Okay. So do all middle schools and high schools have PE classes? And are not all students required to take a PE class?
So
I think you mentioned that.
So all students would, so there is a requirement at the high school level, so it's going to be the easiest one, for PE, but it's only for half a credit of it. So you may only take PE one semester of your entire high school career. If you are then requiring PE every year, you will greatly diminish the opportunities for other academic pursuits that the students might have. Because if I have to build PE in every day of every school year, which was what was going to be required with the 60 minutes thing, without lengthening the school year dramatically, students would not be able to take as many different classes.
But that would,
Yes, you may.
but that could or probably would be an elective that they would be giving up.
So there are many students that take a PE elective all 4 years of high school. I would say that, I can't say this as definitely, but in middle school, there are also PE classes. Depends on how you set up your elective wheel. You may have PE first semester and not second semester because you have health second semester, but you would have it during the year sometime, typically in the middle grades. But at the high school, you would have a lot of students that don't have a PE class every year that they're there.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
Here's a moment of I walked uphill to school both ways moment for me. I had PE every single year of middle school, and I had PE 2 years of high school. So the kids now, they get one semester of PE as a requirement.
Required. I mean, there are plenty of, I mean, most schools have plenty of other opportunities for PE, but if it is required that every student takes the Kansas fitness test based on the presidential fitness test, some students, we'd have to come up with some other time for them to do that.
Thank you very much, Representative Boatman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think the part of my question was answered in that it sounds like all grade schools have some form of recess. But the other part of my question was going to be, you had said that there were some middle schools included fifth grade. And do those fifth graders have recess, or are those just schools without recess? And would this create a mandate that those schools would have to provide recess for a single grade? Thank you.
So in that regard, it's going to vary. Whereas I can say all elementaries have a recess, and I would say very few middle schools have recess. The fourth, fifth grade, when they get in there, it depends. There are some that actually are, there are K-8 building in fourth and fifth grader, so use some of the middle school teachers and have it. I couldn't say with a surety that fifth grade students don't get recess, but I would say it's less common if they are in a traditional middle school setting.
Chairman Getz, and then McDonald and Schmoy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. 15 minutes is pretty quick. I do a lot of 15-minute meetings in this building, and it goes by pretty fast. And I wondered how you know, if a student is transitioning from a classroom, then getting to wherever recess is happening, and then back to the classroom, is all of that included in the 15 minutes, or is there a passing period? And is there a certain amount of allotment for passing periods that then that doesn't affect the actual time that you're trying to track for each of those things? How does that part of it work?
So passing periods of less than 10 minutes can be counted as part of the instructional day. So that's the same thing with high school. If you do it, if it's more than 10 minutes, we say it's a break instead of a passing period. So you can build in that time of moving from the classroom. Passing periods typically are not as big a deal at the elementary because it's, you know, we get up and go at that time. So, and that would be different. Is it, again, if you remember back when you were 10 or under, 15 minutes seemed to last longer than it does now. And when you're supervising 5-year-olds, 15 minutes may seem like a really long time. To a little bit back to Representative Brantley's questions before about brain breaks, those don't get counted. I mean, that is more teacher discretionary time. It's just that, as you may in a committee meeting after you've been here for 90 minutes, think, really, it'd be great to get up and walk around the room for a second. Those don't get counted either way. I don't know that they would qualify as recess time, but they would just be considered in part of the instructional day.
Thank you. Representative McDonald, and then Schmoy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sometimes I wonder what problem we're solving, and it shocks me how much time we spend on things that seem to already be happening. But I guess my question, I'd like some clarity. The group from Florida that seems to have brought this bill to us, the conferee mentioned that recess counts as instructional time. How does Kansas Department of Education define instructional time, and does recess count?
So the instructional time is the length of the school day, so from the first bell to the last, minus lunchtime, any passing periods that are more than 10 minutes, and any recess time that is more than 15 minutes at the beginning and the end of, or in the morning and the afternoon. So you start with how long is your school day, and then we take out some pieces, mostly about what we would consider excess or extra recess, lunchtime, and then if you have passing periods of over 10 minutes.
Thank you. I think this is just a good example of why Kansas, these bills that we shop around state to state really are not from here. And so I think we need to develop things for ourselves. Thank you.
Representative Schmoy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was sitting here, thankfully not using Google Harwood, but actually Googling the Presidential Youth Fitness Program, and it looks like they brought that back, executive order, last year. Do we know if any of our Kansas schools have implemented this, are wanting to do it, and if they've applied for the federal funding that goes with that?
So I'm not aware of any federal funding that goes with, so there was an executive order that said that they were going to bring back the presidential fitness test. They've put together a group of people that are supposed to be doing that. We are not aware of anything that's come out from that. There is the old presidential fitness test, but they haven't said that we're going to go back and use the old one. This other group is supposed to come up with metrics to go with that. So we're still waiting for that guidance. So if a school, you may have school districts out there that are using the old presidential fitness test and using it in some regard, but at this point, to the best of our knowledge, there is not currently guidelines for a presidential fitness test.
If they do offer federal funding with this, would you be supportive of that?
Go ahead.
I guess I would have to look at what the federal funding is for and what the requirements are. I mean, I think anytime you're looking at that, that's what you look at is, what do I have to do to get it, and what does it do when I get it?
Strings, yes, government. Thank you.
Any other questions for the conferee? Dr. Harwood, thank you for being with us again today. Again, get to work on your amendments. If you think someone else is going to offer the same one, I was already going to do an amendment for removing sixth grade and up, and I'm happy to change that language to elementary. Need to make sure that that doesn't harm the governor's rural transformation healthcare grant. But as long as it's kosher with that, then happy to make that amendment. On that note, does anybody else have anything? Seeing none, we are adjourned. Thank you all for giving us your Friday, and I'm so glad not to be the only person in this room today. And to our substitutes, Representatives McDonald's and Bohai, you get extra brownie points for